We'll begin the meeting with a moment of silence. This meeting is being recorded and televised by the local cable company. I'd like a motion to approve bill and payroll warrants.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like a motion to accept correspondence in the read file.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Public forum, now is the time for somebody to talk for something that's not explicitly on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Sure.
It's come to my attention today about a Facebook post concerning me. I read all the points of view politically. Right, alt-right, left, alt-left. I try to educate myself to be the best person that I can be, to make judgments to be fair and equitable for everyone. I was called out today for being Islamophobic, and I find it outrageous. In all the times I read and educate myself, I come along posts. I made a post. The post was 5 words. It was concerning elections and how people get elected. This was about recent Muslims being elected to office. My comment was 5 words. One nibble at a time, which, if you aren't in the inside baseball of politics, it means 1 seat at a time. And the political parties in this state do just that, 1 seat at a time. And me being a member of the super minority party in this state, that is the only way that we can operate, 1 seat at a time. And that's how we do it. I have no ill will towards anyone of any color, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or religion. I find it offensive that anyone would suggest otherwise. If you can't win in the arena of ideas and solutions, you take the track of personal character assassination. You've hurt my family and my dear friends. I find the whole thing offensive. This is not good for Whitman. What have we become? Since I took out papers in January, it's been a constant barrage of innuendos and insults. This way, Whitman deserves better, and I will not let my good name and reputation be tarnished this way. I'm going to fight this. I've already suggested to my attorney, personal attorney, to look into defamation of character. This will not stand. I yield back.
Thank you. Approval of meeting minutes, open session, March 26, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
First item on the agenda is a policy update. Frank.
Last midweek, I sent a recommended update to our policies to reflect how free cash should be managed and an election calendar process for us for both town meeting and elections going forward. I would ask that the board review it and we bring it back for a vote
Perhaps
at
the,
our next
the
meeting.
We received this with our package. Does anyone have any initial questions for Frank?
No, it's good. I like it.
Yep. Okay, next, act on the request of Town Clerk Don Varley to appoint checkers for the May 6, 2019 annual special town meeting.
So moved.
Second.
And there's a list here somewhere, right? Sheila McVeigh, Priscilla Waugh, Leanne Valancourt, and Carol O'Brien.
Yep.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Chief Breno has an issue with, or has a request for out-of-town travel. Chief?
Mr. Chairman, Board, at the end of this month, the 26th and 27th, I'll be traveling down to the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg for the Executive Fire Officer Symposium. It's a two-day program for which I am a graduate of the Executive Leadership Program down there, which is a four-year program. The cost of that travel is slightly under $200. It's about $160 to $170. I'm not sure if I have to come before the board now with the new out-of-state policy or...
Okay, if anybody wants to speak on this, but we did pass a motion last year to put a freeze on out-of-state travel.
Mhm.
We made an exception for the police chief because he had arranged for the travel ahead of time. The board could probably make an exception if it wishes to.
Okay.
I need to hear from the board, though, to find out what they're thinking.
Okay.
I understand it's important for you. It has to
Right.
do with your upkeeping your accreditation or your
Correct. Right.
certification. Okay. Just one question. It's 180. What's that about? You're driving down, and that's
Right.
basically
We're
gas
driving down,
money?
driving back, and meals, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And,
the cost of
um,
tuition. It's
It's
a free academy to attend.
Okay, about $184, you said?
Maybe less, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if that much, yeah.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for the chief?
Lodging and everything is covered at
Correct.
the academy.
Yes, it is, yeah.
So the only expense is your gas
Travel
money?
down and back, yeah.
Okay.
I
must
wouldn't
have
want
read
to
it
see certifications lost for $184, especially after somebody invested 4 years of time to get those certifications.
Okay, would you like to make a motion
I will- I
to,
will- I will make a
to
motion
waive our
to-
policy for that?
Make an exception.
I will
Make an exception to the
make a
policy?
motion to make an exception to Chief Grano based on, to make the exemption of the out-of-state travel policy.
I'll second it for discussion. I have just one more question. Chief, in the letter that you sent us, is that a missed thing when you put $84?
$84 is part of the, that's part of the travel, yes.
Okay.
Did I not put a one in front of it? It's my mistake.
No one in front of it. Okay. I was saying, that's kind of cheap.
Yeah, sorry.
Anybody else?
Seeing as it's a
Job
very,
related.
very small amount and it's vital to his certification continuing, I think we should make the exception.
Okay.
Thank you.
All those, we haven't voted yet, chief. All those in favor?
Aye.
Have a good trip. Review of the MSBA core program statement of interest process. Frank or Superintendent Simnak?
First of all, I would like to thank the members of the board,
Did you get it,
Dr.
Dennis?
Kowalski, for giving us an opportunity, a few minutes of your time, to hear our request to submit a statement of interest to start the process rolling for a new or renovated Whitman Middle School. Since I became superintendent in in July, I've walked the building with Director of Facilities Ernie Sandlin and our Assistant Superintendent George Farrow, who lived in the building for 12 years. We have some issues at Whitman Middle School that are ongoing that will be challenging in the future as far as costs and maybe the health and safety of our students and our teachers in that building. I've asked Ernie Sandlin to prepare this statement of interest over the past few months. He's done that. The school committee approved moving forward with the statement of interest, and now it stands with the Whitman Board of Selectmen to approve the statement of interest to get us in the queue with MSBA. This could be a short-term process, probably not, but it could also be a 5 or 6 year long process before they accept us. It depends on the severity of what they deem is important in our middle school. So it could be 5 years. South Shore Voc Tech has been in the queue for 5 years right now for some renovations.
Now, we get turned down.
Correct. So me and my leadership team ask for your blessing, so to speak, to move forward, because I think without being in the queue, sooner than later, we stand to potentially risk the health and safety of our students and cost as we move to replace different things. I'd like to ask Ernie to come up and explain the process and what we have found in the research.
Okay, thank you.
I got my backup, George Farrell. So. Okay, so I don't know if you have it in front of you. I'd like to go through the process we went through, what we deliberated. We've been in constant communication with MSBA. May I say, when I go through the research, this was the SBA, School Building Assistance body. This is the submittal back in 1998, that went to SBA for Whitman Middle renovation. So when you look at this document, it's 90% plans completed. The process will go through, and I'll explain that whole thing to you. Process will go through. It'll be 20 times thicker than this thing, and there'll be documents that you cannot believe that we're going to have to produce to identify whether we do a renovation or we do a new building. So let me start the process with you and where we came up with our decision on, to submit the SOI. So what we do is we decide, if you turn to page 4, we chose to do a replacement of a building. So when you look at the 3 choices, when you go through the selection, if we were to do a replacement renovation of a building, that would give us a whole bunch of different forms that we would have to develop and have to commit to the state. And same thing, so when you look at number 5, it's replacement, renovation, or modernization of a school facility system such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating, ventilation system to increase energy conservation, to decrease related costs of school facility. Decrease related cost of school facility. 2-3 months ago, I got a call from a state fire marshal that was over there to inspect an air tank, looked in the boiler room, and sent me a quick email and a text saying that this chimney has to be fixed right away. There's rot, he sees rots, it's got to be replaced right away. We talked to him. It ended up costing us $11,000 to replace 2-3 sections in the boiler vent going out the back of the building. So those are the things that we're starting to see that are killing us as far as budget numbers. So looking at the documentation, we had to also produce a teacher ratio, the master educational plan. So as you go down the list, and I don't know if you have any questions because I've been over this thing 20 times. The important thing when you're on MSBA site, when you make a change, make sure you save it, because I've been in the place where I've not clicked save and lost everything I just typed. So this has all obviously been saved and waiting for release, which is Friday the 12th, correct? So as you go through it, they ask us for our budget process. We had to submit what we're going to submit is our capital expenditure and the process we go through with the town and the district. As you go, again, general descriptions, give a general description of the history of the Whitman Middle School. Whitman Middle School was opened in 1972, had one major renovation completed in 2000. The specific upgrade completed 97 as the building was originally equipped with electric heat. So that's an interesting thing because I had to do a lot of research when I got the job here, and it was April 11th, 2005 that I became a facility manager in Whitman Hanson. I didn't even know where Cawthell Avenue was. But once I got over to Cawthell Avenue, when you look at the old Univents, that school was built for entire electric heat, electric boiler, electric hot water, and then all the Univents throughout the building were all electric. In '87, Oresco came in there and they did a renovation and they took the old Singer. We thought they made sewing machines, but they make Univents too. Singer Univents, and converted them to forced hot water. But what they didn't do, they put a coil in there, but all the controls are all Singer controls that are not out there anymore, that you can't even buy on eBay or any crazy site like that. So we're dealing with a conversion of Univents that as we went through the interview process, we kind of knew what was going on. When they did the renovation, they upgraded some things, but we still have pneumatics. So we have air. We have a compressor that runs all summer long because it needs to run all summer long to run the air handlers that are on the roof, that they actually converted, the new air handlers they converted to be on pneumatics. So some of the stuff that they did wasn't helpful to us. So again, it's loaded with leaks in the walls, so we have fluctuation in temperatures all over the place. So the criteria we used is, let's investigate how we can make these repairs. We looked at the capital expenditures. We've been putting in for the past, since I've been here, we've been putting in money to do work in that building as far as upgrades, go to a DDC system. But we're at that point. We're spending so much money on repairs over there that it's a budget killer. And that's one of the advantages and disadvantages. It kills our budget now, but it's one of the advantages that the state MSBA looks at when they do our percentages. In a couple of minutes, because I'm not going to take a lot more time, a couple of minutes I'll go over the time frame and what we'll go through, and also on the percentages that the state will give us. Again, I don't know if you read the document. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Again, going through the building that was built in '72 and the addition, and most of the people here probably have had kids that have gone through school there. I've had basketball in that building. The floor that we have, the gym floor that we have there, it looks pretty now because we spent $25,000 on sanding and putting new lines in, replacing boards, but it's still a gym floor that's sitting on concrete. Now it's just, I get a phone call 2 weeks ago that a section of the floor broke from dry rot. So we're starting to see some issues in that school that are starting to make it not good for us as far as budget. I'll stop for a minute. Do you have any questions on the document? No. Okay. So then the document is the document. Let's go over the timeline. We picked priority 5 because we want to probably not renovate that building. It'll probably be a new school once we go through it. And in the process that we'll go through is we submit by April 12th, we submit our SOI, Statement of Interest, and then by December of 2019, MSBA Board of Directors will sit down and make a decision. We'll either know that by January or through March at some time. They'll say to us that we accept all your findings. There'll be a lot of phone calls between George and Jeff with the people from the state asking a whole bunch of questions, more documentation, which we'll supply them. And from then, once they say they make a decision, December 2019, let's go through the process of what's going to happen. And that's what I think what you're going through, Dan, at South Shore, 5 years later. But you've had, how long have you had the SOI in there?
A long time.
Okay.
Keep doing it over and over.
Some of that documentation will probably change
Yeah.
in the next couple of years. But so if by December they say we're good to go, it'll be 2 months that there'll be some deliberation between the superintendent and MSBA. By then, we have to have, for May town meeting, we have to have a number to you, May of 2020, for a feasibility study. From May, it'll be 4 months out that we'll have once we get the money, it'll be 4 months out where we'll be able to hire a project engineer. Now, this is just to do the feasibility study. That's a $500,000 to $750,000 price tag. So then, from the feasibility study, it'll take about 7 months. And included in that feasibility study is it'll be preliminary design. So there's 7 months out there. And then what happens with the preliminary design, it gets sent to MSBA. They review it. It takes them 2 to 3 months to review it. After that, they'll look at the model school. They'll say, okay, they'll look at a design. There's a model school out there right now for a middle school. They'll suggest, just like Whitman Regional High School was the model school that's built throughout the state. There'll be a model school out there that they'll make recommendations that they have to investigate after they see our design. They have to investigate while they get all that information. From there, we'll go into schematic design. That takes 6 months. After the schematic design, it'll get submitted to the MSBA for another 2 months. And then from there, the MSBA looks at the budget, and then by July of 2022, we'll have a decision. Now, July of 2022. Now, we understand most cases we don't have a special town meeting, but at that time, they're going to request. They have the budget together, they have the schematic design, they've figured out model school or no model school, and at that time, the town of Whitman and the district have to make a decision what they're going to do. They're going to have an override, they're going to have an article, or they're going to wait till May town meeting to get that, so the May town meeting of the following year, to get that on the article for town meeting for approval. So you can see it's a long process out there, but what we've uncovered through this whole, we've asked the staff, and George, again, can tell you in more detail, but we've asked the staff some of the issues that they're dealing with. And it's amazing, because we go through a work order system. I'll get no heat, I'll get too much heat, I'll get it's too hot, I'll get, we have birds in the gym, we have bees in classroom 220, all these things that we deal with, termites in the lower section, all these things, mice, constant complaints about mice. So I'm not saying those are standard throughout the district, but it just seems to be, at a different level at Whitman Middle. So through this evaluation and through the conversations we've had with the teachers, some of the items that we have to address, obviously, are budget killers. And we obviously have to sit down with the town and figure out where we're going from here. But right now, as you look at this document, it's interesting reading, and you'll say, wow, I didn't realize that's going on over there. So are we all clear on the reason we do an SOI? And then the time frame. All right? Any
Anyone have any
questions?
questions?
Yeah, Ernie,
Yeah.
what is the typical reimbursement rate right now?
All right. Okay, so the reimbursement rate is 31%. But what happens from there? There's an 18 percentage points that you can gain, and nobody can gain any more than 18 in the state of Massachusetts from the percentage points. And some of those percentage points are based on newly formed regional schools, high-efficiency green schools, best practices for routine capital maintenance. I'd give myself when I look at that, they only award 2 points, but when the state starts to look at what we do, we've been through this before, they said that's all they can do. I wish they could give more, because it would push towns to do a better job. Overlay of zoning, renovation, reuse of existing facilities, that's 5 points. And establish a maintenance trust up to 1 point district-wide. So you got the base, and then all the other things add up, and then you can get to whatever that number is. It could be, it's not going to be less than 31%. That's where you start.
What's the typical cost for, what are they building them for now?
I would say between $54 and $75 million, middle school. That includes furniture, fixtures, and equipment. There's a lot that goes with that. They have specific things that they want, plus architectural fees. There's a project manager that's involved in this process now. Something, thank God, we had at the regional high school, because that stopped a lot of contractors from doing whatever they wanted. But I think that's one of the better things that the state has adopted.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Ernie, are we going to go with like middle schools that are being built, we'll use their design? Is it going to look like what Hanson's got? Because I think Hanson's got some things that, I don't know, if we do not need, like a big auditorium that they have their town meeting at.
If I could, George Farrow, 320 Harvard Street.
Yeah.
Been waiting to say that for years. So I think that Hanson Middle School was built 2004, 2005, and they were the first middle school that really got into this flexible space.
Yeah.
And this flexible, and they do it a little bit differently. When you say things like an auditorium and Whitman Middle School's never had that. So if you ever went to Whitman Middle School, you probably played basketball there. You probably did a lot of things there. Probably went to Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. But there would be some things that are all options that take place. But when you look at a model middle school, as far as the MSBA is concerned, they give you the blueprint of what you want to do, and then there are like a la carte menu choices should you want to invest money in different areas, like an auditorium or things of that
Needs
nature.
in one town may not be the needs in another.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly.
Because I'll let it go with that.
Right. I would contend that, having been, I started in 2003, I believe it was, so it was like 15 years ago. But I came from a middle school that was 5 to 8. This school would be laid out as a 5 to 8 middle school, so it would be a comprehensive adolescent middle school, and to match what is taking place within the region. But I would contend that something like a auditorium is vital to the lifeblood of a middle school. Now, obviously, there's a cost associated with that, which I'm not privy to because I have my boss here and everybody else, but I still do have thoughts and suggestions on that. But this is, if you think about the amount of things that take place at the middle school from a town perspective, going back to 1972, if you think about the amount of things that people just put up with at the middle school. Because do you realize that when McQuon closed, there were people, including myself, that were cheering that I could get some of the old chairs from McQuon to put in the classrooms at the Whitman Middle School, because there's folding chairs in the classrooms. So when Ernie talks about there'll be new furniture fixtures, if this were to go through, that's a boon. That's awesome, because there aren't now. So tonight just starts the possible process. It just gets us in line, gets us in the queue, could go on for years. But when you look at a health perspective for the amount of mold that is in that school, we have a mold abatement program. We've talked about it for years with this board. 4 years ago, we had a meeting about it that was at the high school. The night we had the Johns Hopkins time, so the school committee meeting got moved to the cafeteria at the new high school. When you talk about mold, when you talk about things like infestation blooms of termites, when you talk about non-heat, when you talk about the Singer univents won't open, so when that happens, the damper stays open, and depending on what the weather is outside, mold will grow on the outside of the brick walls. When you talk about all these things, it's incumbent upon the school district, who values their students and employees, to say, we need to bring this forward, and that's what we're asking.
Thank you, George. Anyone else have any questions? Like a motion to support the statement of interest?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion of that? All
So the
those in
vote
favor?
will be to adopt the resolution
Right.
presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
What is that, 75-foot ceiling? That's another thing.
Next item on the agenda, budget review. I'm going to turn it over to Frank.
Well, we've got a couple of things. We have been discussing for a couple of months the prospect of an override and the prospect of a debt exclusion. Debt exclusion, of course, to fund the debt service for the police station, fire station, town hall, and an override to support the capital needs of the town and what has been an expanding budget. We've gone through several iterations of budget estimates. We've had differing opinions on how to proceed based on, at least in part, whether we believe we will get the support we need to, one, do a debt exclusion, and two, do an override. As you all know, we are in the process of developing a long-term capital plan and budget model. I expect to see the preliminary draft of that probably by the end of April. And I think it would be a more effective plan to move ahead with town meeting with a debt exclusion to free up some capital money and to build and develop a long-term plan based on increased revenue from an override, which is not going to happen overnight. Because of that, I am recommending that we look at a budget initially that does not include an override, but does include a debt exclusion. And the points to that would be to vote Article 2 with no operational override, funding the obligations that are previously defined that we're already committed to, using free cash and capital stabilization for the capital needs. The remaining balance of free cash and capital stabilization would be $460,000. The free cash portion of it would be $243,471. To utilize the remaining levy and free cash to fund essential articles. That would include going up to Article 29 on our current proposed warrant. And without getting redundant, that'll again leave us with $243,471 in free cash and $178,682 in capital stabilization. We include the debt exclusion for May town meeting to fund the bond, and we adjourn town meeting potentially until June 3rd in order to go through the election cycle, determine whether the voters have supported the debt exclusion, and then return to conduct business based on whether or not the debt exclusion was successful. Assuming it is, we would start planning on additional capital expenditures that were requested this year. Assuming it isn't, we could then go back, look at additional cuts in order to develop enough funding to do the things that need to be done. Assuming again that it passes, we would then have the opportunity over the summer to work through the capital planning process and present a well-defined and supported request for an override.
Thank you.
That's my recommendation.
Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start out by, as I usually do, by reviewing the Finance Committee's activities over the last couple of weeks since we met last on June 19th. So in the last 2 weeks, we met with the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District, the Council on Aging Director, Technology Director, South Shore VOTEC, the Building Department, the Board of Health, and the Treasurer Collector. In between these meetings, we have also continued to discuss and modify the Article 2 worksheet. That was reviewed with this board in mid-March. Department heads are updated as they come in to meet with the committee. As has been well published, we have adjusted our recommendation for allocating to the operating expense for the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District to $13,800,992 on Article 2, which represents a 4% increase to the town's assessment from fiscal 2019. The initial motion for this action took place with the representatives for the district present on March 26th. We then requested for the town administrator to recalculate the remaining lines on Article 2 to reflect this unanimous recommendation. On March 28th, the accountant, Ken Lytle, forwarded the updated Article 2 to the Finance Committee, which is the document we have been using since in all of our subsequent meetings with department heads, and that is what you have before you in your packet that I highlighted the bottom so you'd know which one. Okay. The day after the Selectmen's meeting of last I sent an email to the members of the board to relay the unanimous concern we have for the newest direction you appear to be taking with respect to a recommendation at town meeting. I believe our vice chair would like to make a statement specifically to a new Article 2 that was presented to selectmen. And I expect other members of the committee to chime in as well. The biggest concern we have at this point is for eliminating the Proposition 2.5 override as part of the recommendation. We sincerely hope that you are willing to discuss this further, as we feel very strongly that it's a critical component of a sustainable budget recommendation this fiscal year. With that, I'll turn it over to the Vice Chair, Dave Cordero.
Thank you, Eric. Sorry, I was trying to bring on my notes there. So coming here tonight, I really had to think how I was going to explain to everyone in this room, to anybody watching TV, to the residents of Whitman, how that Article 2 that was presented to us, that was described to us as a department head Article 2, that it's not a sustainable approach. That's the headline. So, before I explain that and get into that, department heads are going to explain that, their Article 2, it avoids layoffs. Great, commendable. I applaud them for doing that. Commendable thing. 2, that their 2019 budgets absorb anticipated increases of salary and expenses. And 3, that they've increased the percentage assessment to the schools from 4% to another number. Again, all 3 of those extremely commendable in protecting the departments and those who work within the department. I commend them for that. The department heads are also going to tell you that, and they'll be 100% correct, that when they say that the residents of Whitman have supported their budgets in the past, absolutely correct. That's the form of government that we have. And to make any changes to that is going to go against the will of the people. We've heard this argument. But what they'll leave out of this argument in their statements is that the residents of Whitman come to town meeting and they vote on line item budgets from the department heads with the predisposition that the department heads have both their best interests in mind and have to provide a budget that maintains sustainability. I argue that their Article 2 does not provide the latter. And the other question out there is, why can't we make changes to decisions that were made in the past? I mean, it's inconceivable that someone would say, well, we've made a decision to go down this path, we have to put our blinders on and go, no matter what perils are in the way. It's nonsensical. I didn't get into the weeds. I didn't evaluate their document to the nth degree, but it's my understanding that the department head's Article 2 is reliant on both passing the override and the debt exclusion. Well, it's a dangerous way to play with the sustainability of the future of this town. An analogy that you can make is that you max out your credit card in the hopes, and you buy a lottery ticket in the hopes that you're going to win. You're going to spend everything in the hopes that something's going to change in the future. And the odds of that changing are astronomical. What distresses me most is that the department heads did this in the shadows of open meeting. that at first excluded the schools. A second meeting was then held, again, outside the realm of the Finance Committee, and it's my understanding that the Board of Selectmen are considering voting the recommendation of this Article 2. We just heard from the school department. They're going to submit a feasibility study for hundreds of thousands of dollars that the town of Whitman will be responsible for. Where's that money going to come from? Just last year, we took over $800,000 from capital stabilization, a one-time injection of money into the budget to try to get us to this year. And here we are, no closer with solutions than we were almost 12 months ago. In the past, I've asked that we don't kick this can down the road, and certain people have taken offense to that statement of the can. Well, it's here we are again, and utilizing that Article 2 that's being presented by the department heads does that exactly. We're going to kick the can down the road. And if the override and the debt exclusion do not pass, we're going to be here again next year. They're having the same conversations that we had last year, that we had the year before, that at every town meeting that I've been at over the past 10 years, individuals have come up to the town and said, I implore you, we're spending too much money. The revenue isn't going to come in as much as we think it is. Let's be sustainable. You have a resident, Sean Kane, if you're here, you know, me and Sean Kane aren't the best of friends, but he's right. And he's been telling you every day for the past months, year, that we need some kind of sustainability before we move forward. This Article 2 that's being presented by the department heads is not there. So take my comments for what it is, but that's how I see it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dick. Frank.
I'd like to address a couple of comments. The one I'm offended by.
You know, Frank, can I interrupt you for 1 second? You can be offended. You know, Justice Sotomayor had said she wished that everybody would just have a thick skin. This isn't personal,
I have
Frank.
as thick a skin as anyone here.
This isn't personal.
But I
Stop being
want to
offended
correct
with your
what you said, which is
It's fine.
inaccurate. Don't cut me off. You've said, and some other people have said in this meeting, in this forum, that there were behind closed door or secret meetings. So let's
I did not use those words. I did not use those
You're
words.
interrupting again.
That's fine, but don't mischaracterize what I said. Mr. Chairman, will you please allow me to say that?
I'd like him to finish what he's saying
That's fine, but-
without being interrupted.
Fine.
He listened to your opinions.
I know, but mischaracterizing,
Well, when I heard you say that, it resonated with me as far as closed doors are concerned too.
I did not say secret, I did not say closed doors. What I said was in the shadows of an open meeting.
Okay.
Was there a memo that provided that meeting, that provided invitations to that meeting?
What does that mean?
There was.
Wait a minute. What was?
And
Excuse
did
me.
that meeting exclude other people? Yes, it did.
Shadow of an. Okay, shadows. That's your definition of shadows of an open meeting.
That is.
Okay, so once again,
I understand what you're saying.
I am commenting on what was said at our last meeting and what was said tonight. There were allegations of secret meeting. The words behind closed door meeting was used, and in this particular instance, a shadow meeting. First of all, if the department heads choose to meet and discuss issues, that is not a public meeting. That is not a public forum. It's not a posted meeting. Government bodies operate under the open meeting law. The fact that they held a meeting and that I wasn't aware of it and wasn't invited to attend does not shake me as being something inappropriate or untoward. If they choose to meet that way, then they meet that way. They're not obligated to post meetings. They're not obligated to invite the public. They have an opportunity to sit down and plan together. That is not an open meeting. What you're sitting here doing now is an open meeting. So don't characterize it as a shadow meeting or a secret meeting. It isn't. And as far as whether or not the schools were here, that's a decision that whoever organized that meeting made. They felt it was more productive to have a group meeting, and the schools were invited to the next meeting. In fact, I extended the invitation. So let's not get hung up on this nonsense about secret meetings. To address what you said, the budget that we have to prepare for May 6th has to be a budget that will allow the town to function. You mentioned Sean, I'll mention Sean. Sean has been an advocate and virtually campaigning for a capital plan and process. We've embraced that. We've contracted for it. You want to just postpone the budget until we have one? That's fine, but we're going to run out of money July 1st. So if you have a plan that's going to give you both an override and a debt exclusion, and you're going to identify where that money is going, fine. Right now, I don't have that, and I don't see it. So what I've presented is what I believe will allow us to function. It does not, excuse me, it does not require an override to pass this. It leaves us basically in the same boat we were in when we started this year. Limited funds. But it's functional. It also gives the schools 6.5%, which is somewhat more than the 4% placeholder that's been recommended. So, I mean, the whole purpose of this is to talk about budgets, and we'll talk about them, but characterize it appropriately.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just
Yep.
I think we're all on the same page. I think we're all committed to working collaboratively to create a budget. What I think the difference is the budget that the Finance Committee has been working on assumes no 2.5 override and assumes no debt exclusion. So it's not apples to apples. I just want to make that clear. So what we hope to do with this approach and the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen is to develop that second Article 2 that either at the discretion of the Board of Selectmen includes a 2.5 override or a debt exclusion or neither. But the fact is that the budget that the Finance Committee has worked on and the only Article 2 is the worst case scenario Article 2, which assumes that the town just does not have the resources to support anything more than a 4% assessment to the schools and cut the other town budgets. So, like I said, we're committed to continuing the conversation here. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that a little, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, if I may? Yes.
All right, thank you. I was at both meetings, and this is what I understand. When the Finance Committee asked department heads to present a budget, two scenarios. One was what, a 6% cut, one was whatever the cuts were.
3 and 6, yep. That was the first meetings of the year, yeah.
What was the cuts?
To do, give us an impact of a 3 and 6% cut
Okay,
to the
that being said, when they looked at their budgets, right, it got out there that there possibly would be layoffs in the town. It got out there, right? We had town employees that were fearful that they were gonna lose their job. Right, and we have departments that just have 2, 3 people. That being said, the department heads got together to say, we need to save our people's jobs. What can we do? Now, we didn't know about this. They got together, and I believe the chief could correct me, the fire chief, I think they met down at the police station, all the department heads from, like a department head meeting, saying, look, what can we do? Because our people are afraid they're gonna lose their jobs. Are they gonna be looking elsewhere? And particularly, some of the employees have applied elsewhere. Fear that they were gonna lose their job between the 6 and the 3% decrease in their salary. And they thought, well, the easiest thing to do is to cut payroll. You'll lose people. So they were in fear. Town employees. Now, I'm not talking about schools yet, but just town employees. So they did meet. And what they did was they took an Article 2, your Article 2 with the 4% to the schools, and where they could cut in their budget to save their people's jobs, really making drastic cuts. And then they met with Carl and I. They asked us up here to tell us what they did. Knowing that Hanson gave 6.5, or 6, whatever it is, to the schools, we're saying we offer 4, Hanson's gonna offer 6. If they pass the 6 and we pass the 4, that means they're gonna come back. You know the schools are gonna come back with the higher of the 2, and then we have to have another town meeting or a super town meeting. Eventually, they're gonna end up getting the 6, 6.5, whatever it is, right, that Hanson gave. So I asked them, the department heads, look at, I know you cut the heck out of your budget to save your people's jobs. Is there a way we need to match Hanson and give the schools at least what Hanson's given them? And whatever the number was. So they went back and did more cuts in their own, they called each one cut, whether it's $2 or $3, they didn't care, or $100 or $1,000. They cut, 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 cut. And also, and they maintain the contracts for the union employees. They negotiated a 2% increase, they got it. That was their way of solving the problem, cutting their budget. And I commended them for doing what basically you guys asked them to do. What can you work with? And they didn't want to just say, okay, we're going to cut 3% off our budget. I'm going to lay a person off here, a person off there. Police department may lay off a couple, fire department lay off, whatever it took. They didn't want to do that. They thought it would be bad for the town. Right? So they found other ways. One of the ways they're going to do it is they're going to clean their own buildings. They're going to say to themselves, look, we'll get rid of the custodial and we'll clean our own buildings. We'll empty our own trash. That was, what did they say, like 35,000 or something like that for the town? By cleaning their own trash. I mean, that's one way they're doing it. They just as soon do that than lose an employee. So they're fighting for their people. And I commended them for that. And that was the second meeting that we had. And that was the one that we had. And basically, Frank was kind of looking at the same Article 2 to see if we can match it and match Hanson's contribution to the schools. So we're not banging our heads with another town in the region.
Just quickly.
That, you know, and my whole thing about this is, I'm an elected official in Whitman. We have 6 elected officials for the school department. My first priority is to maintain, you know, and I may differ from somebody else, is to maintain the people who work in the town of Whitman. The security of the...
schools aren't part of the town?
The school is part of the town, you're absolutely right.
That's a garbage statement, Dan.
No, it isn't, Fred.
Yes, it is.
No, because I look at it this way.
Let's not.
Easy, like your superintendent was at our last meeting. I said the easiest thing to do, if you need to cut a budget, is reduce staff. That's the easiest thing. The hardest thing to do is find nickels and dimes that add up to dollars. Right? Littlest monies add up to big money and save as many jobs as you can. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you're not part of the school.
He did
not part of the town.
No, but I would like to address what we've done over the years to save money. We have high schoolers going to school in the black of the dark of the morning because we're able to save $300,000 on busing.
Carl?
We have a copy center that we've saved money by doing copies in-house that won a $25,000 award from MASBO for innovative thinking.
I'm not saying you're not doing your job.
We have done so many things over the years, cutting, cutting, cutting. The only thing left to cut for us is bodies. I would like to address, Mr. Anderson, when we were in your meeting and you brought up the 4%, I believe your committee never voted on the 4%. You voted to discuss it, and that was it. And we were told you were just using it as a number for the heck of it, not that you were using it to go into the article as an example.
I certainly never expected the number to be used by department heads to formulate a separate Article 2. I just wanted to clarify.
I just want people to know we're not complicit in that 4% type of a number.
I certainly understand, and you have to realize we're working on 2 separate budgets. The budget that Mr. Salvucci is discussing is not the Article 2 that the Finance Committee is working on. So just specifically to your question, the motion was made while you were present in the room. The discussion followed your departure, and the vote occurred after you left. So I just wanted to just say how that 4% entered our equation. But again, this is not the recommendation to town meeting. This is a working document for the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen.
But I just didn't want it to give the impression that we were complicit with that type of a
And
number,
if-
because
if
we
that
would,
w- If that was the case, I would be hard-pressed to find anybody that would think that that was the case.
and while I'm up here, I mean, 4%, you want to cut off 2 arms, 2 legs, and the head. 6%, well, 6.5% is devastating to us. We do understand what the constraints are in the town. We do understand, and I commend every department head for getting together. I commend what they do. Police, fire, these people are lively parts of our life every day. They're our lifeblood, and they perform great services. We play by different rules. I mean, to walk into the police chief's office or the fire chief's office and say, hey, you've got to cut $1 million because the schools need it. I'd be upset if I was a police chief or a fire chief, because I'm saying, geez, I play by the rules. I work within my own budget. Why should I have to suffer? Why should my department have to suffer? I can understand that, totally. At the same time, we control our aspect of the budget, and then we have other areas of the budget that we can't control, that just spiral, and we're required to provide these services. And these services can cost for one student $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. And I'll let Jeff, explain if you want a little bit more in detail what the 6.5% means to us and what some of those services are.
Except Rosemary Conley.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wanted the floor.
I will.
It is true that it was a fluid number. We never voted on it as something. We always work with something devastating and try to work up with our largest budget. Last year, I think it was the same situation, that it was confused, that would be a number that would be at. But the part that I want to point out is that we make decisions that consider our demographics. I think we sent that. And when we are coming from a perspective of my department, we are not seeing us as a whole holistic town. And to do this can sometimes manipulate that process and put pressure on the Finance Committee to do its job properly. So, and I appreciate that people came together, but I want them to recognize they did it in a bubble. They did not do it in a holistic financial way, and that it will not be in the best interest of the town. And that's all I'd like to say. I don't think anybody was malicious, but I don't think that it was properly done. And I hope to not see things like this in the future. I hope.
We have some choices to make. And if anyone has watched our meetings for a number of months, one of the things that I've tried to get across is that in order for us to have the town that we'd like to live in, at some point in time, the taxpayers are going to have to pay some more money. And the override, I agree, an override is necessary for that to happen. On the other hand, and I was convinced for a long time that what we needed to do in order not to kick the can down the road, in order to give us the space to do the kind of long-range planning, both capital and operational, strategic, that Mr. Kane brings up, is that we needed to do both debt exclusion and an override to get through this year and to start becoming sustainable in the future. On the other hand, what happened last week with the shadowy meetings was that a group of people got together and came up with it looked to me like, and apparently to some of the rest of the board, to come up with a strategy that would sustain us for a while and allow us to start building, if only by increments, towards the future that we can handle, and that the schools can and in a way that the schools can project how much support we're gonna be able to afford. Frank was working on Article 2 versions at the same time that that group was meeting over the same period of time, and one of the versions that he had that had interested me was one that was very similar to theirs, and that's why I kind of latched onto that. I think I mentioned that to you in an email, Rick. There's a fear that a Proposition 2.5 override won't pass. If a Proposition 2.5 override does not pass, then we're really up the creek. I took a step back myself then, and I said, well, if the department chairs or heads are correct, and they can sustain their departments with the cutting that they had envisioned in their 2 meetings, and that particular version of Article 2 mirrors Frank's enough to allow him to support it. It started to make sense to me that that's what we should do. We should go to this town meeting, pay as much as we can, probably depending upon the success of a debt exclusion, which I thought would probably be an easier sell than a Proposition 2.5 override at this particular time. And then, as Frank had said, once the capital planning people have assisted us enough, once we have had some time to come up with a capital plan that has some depth to it, then ask for a Propositional 2.5 override probably in the fall to deal with capital expenses. At the same time, I've been chagrined forever about the notion that we have a town and we have a school system. They're not different. They're the same. They're the same. Sometimes we get into that. We get into this rhetoric that they're different. They're not. They're the same. They have the same clients. When the schools, and I've always supported the schools, when the schools asked for, last year after getting 9.5%, which was more than a lot of people wanted to give them on this board, but we eventually voted to do that. And we had to rob Peter to pay that Paul. And that's partly what puts us in the situation today. When they came back the next year asking for a 15.1% increase in their budget, I was stunned. I was stunned. I didn't know what they were thinking. Well, I know what they're thinking. We have to do this in order to provide services for our schools. But they had to know. There was no way we could afford that. And I don't want to suggest that the 6.5% is something that we're choosing because Hanson is also choosing it, but there's some practicality there. If the 2 towns agree on that, then that sets up another scenario. Now, the other scenario, as Jeff knows, is once the budget request that he has made, and they've made it already, at 15.1%, once that's rejected, he has to come back with another proposal. And then it goes on from there and see what happens with the 2 towns and if we have a 2-town meeting. I think, only from my point of view, that the best way to go right now is to follow that plan that the department chairs worked on. Basically doing, and that's work that they could have done earlier in the year, true, and given you that advice at the same time as you're asking for them. It didn't happen that way. It happened this way, but that doesn't mean we need to reject it out of hand. My personal feeling is the best course of action is to take that, get us through, get the year started, campaign for a debt exclusion, get the debt exclusion, which gives us some relief, and then in the fall to get some more stability. But I'm just, and what's making me uncomfortable right now is I don't like to say, and if you haven't heard me say this before, that it would be difficult to get a Proposition 2.5 override, that it's something that we can't do. I hear that too often from people. We can't do it. It's not going to happen. That's not the message I want to give at all. Because I think eventually, in order for us to maintain the town that we have, that needs to happen. Needs to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen now. I was just about to mention the young woman that probably wants to go over to the, you know what, why don't you sit here? No. All right. All right. I received both,
Plymouth County.
after you, Jeff, both Rick and I received, excuse me?
I think looking at the real numbers.
No, wait, you're interrupting.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I know I hope I'm not rambling too much. I received an email, Rick and I both did, from the woman that's about to speak. And it gives a really clear picture of who we are as a town. And it's one that is an upside and a downside. It repeats some of the things that I've said, and it says some things that I haven't said publicly very often. We do have, I have said it publicly though. I can remember at one town meeting saying that we should be embarrassed to be in the bottom 10 of the 351 towns, cities and towns in this Commonwealth as far as our support for our schools. However, there are different ways to measure that support too. And Frank can help me with that. However, we have a fire department and a police department we're proud of and that are well funded, and they're well paid, and they have things. They're well supplied. Can't say the same for our schools. Just can't say it. We have to be able to say it. We have to get to a point where we can say it, and we're not at it. We're not at that yet. So whatever we do has to get us towards that. I just have a feeling that the proposition, that the asking for a Proposition 2.5 override immediately with a second Article 2 is not going to be the way to do it, because it might not work. Frank?
Carl, I gave you some numbers up there. It shows that we are pretty much the lowest taxes all around Boston. We're the lowest. We're the bargain of the century, and even if we went up 500 a year for average town, we're still the bargain of the century. Additionally, you just said something really interestingly. We should be serving the demographics. Our fire, when we have so many elderly, fire and police are very important for that demographic. But we aren't meeting that with the demographic of the kids, with our children, with our working families. We're not meeting that demographic. I have no problem, and I don't think we should be comparing different departments. We should be saying, how do these departments service our people? Right now, we are appropriately servicing our demographics on emergency services, but we are not appropriately servicing our children and working families. Now remember, for every child in the town, there's a parent that needs to go to work. And if you look at who works here, they are working class people, something we should be proud of. Nurses, carpenters, that really rely on the schools. So this Proposition 2.5 override, I think if you're honest and upfront, we can get it through. It's something, we have the two most expensive demographics. That's the truth. And to serve them, we might not be able to be the absolute lowest paid taxes in Massachusetts. We might not be able to do that with the most expensive demographics. We should come together to some degree. And we could still be the cheapest around Boston and one of the cheapest in Plymouth County, but we might not be able to have that be our goal anymore. Maybe caring about each other and supporting our schools and supporting our elderly should be our goal. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Brian. Oh, wait a minute. Jeff, I'm sorry.
I'm just listening. Thank you.
Okay.
I've got a lot going on in my head right now. I'm hearing a lot, and I'm appreciative of everybody who's working for a budget for us as a school district. To say I don't have a good relationship with the police chief and the fire chief, I think we have a very good one, and other town departments. When I call 911, Chief Greno comes running, and he was instrumental in helping me with the Conley epidemic when we had to close the building. So I appreciate everything that they do. We are in the bottom. We are in the bottom. I came here in 2010, we were in the bottom. We started to creep up a little bit. With a 6.5, we're going to be back further into the bottom. I appreciate Mr. Small saying that we have unfunded and underfunded mandates. My special ed out-of-district line has gone up $1.5 million in 2 years. I can't stop that. I will correct Mr. Small, we don't spend $400,000 on a kid. We have gone up to 3.25, and that's not including transportation. Those are the pieces that I can't control. Mr. Salvucci, I appreciate I can't control my people. And with a 6.5, I just want to go down the list of people that will either lose their position or get a pink slip depending on a retirement or a resignation. I'm going to lose three non-union employees. I'm going to lose middle school foreign language. I'm going to lose 6 paraprofessionals. I'm going to lose 3 duty aides. I'm going to cut my elementary music person who's .4. I'm going to lose a guidance person, and I'm going to lose 19 teachers. Okay? That's with the 6.5. Now, I've heard we can use E&D. That's a school committee decision. I can make recommendations on E&D, but right now I'm 630 over in special education for this year. We budgeted for 3.25. We're over. Student moves into town. I got to service that student. Want to service them the best we can, and sometimes that is not within our school. We rely on grants, and I think, George, how many staff do we have off the top of your head? 82 people are employed with grants that we get from the state and the federal government. 82. We bring in a little over $300,000 in school choice money because kids want to come to the high school, so we keep them, we admit them in grades 9 and 10, so their sending school pays us, which sounds, $5,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but when I put those together and I can hire a teacher, they can service 125 students. So we have 7 or 8 teachers in that school choice. What I said to FinCom and what I've said in the past is that if we don't look good for our students who are in district, the opportunity for them to go to South Shore Charter School or to South Shore Voc Tech, which again, I think it's a great opportunity for some of our students, but they are going. Abington is now school choice, East Bridgewater is school choice, Rockland is school choice, West Bridgewater is school choice, and Bridgewater-Raynham are school choice. All local districts that are funding their budgets more than what we have. They're not in the bottom 7. If a student wants to go there, they may. We will lose Chapter 70 money, and we'll also pay a fee. And if that student is special education, we pay more. So those are the numbers, and I appreciate, again, I want to thank people for working hard for our budget. I don't want to be the black sheep. I mean, I've been the schools. My relationship with people in the audience and with the guys is good. I've been involved in conversations. I'll say that much, and I appreciate those conversations. Sometimes we can get a little animated, but I appreciate that. That means people are passionate. I'm passionate about our kids. I'm passionate about my teachers who work their butts off every day with nothing. If we went to 4, folks, I'm looking at 23 teachers, all of the above. We cut our math program. We cut, I cut counselors. I cut much more. We go back to the dark ages, pre-2009, recession time. So 4 was devastating when I heard that come out. 6.5 is more tangible, but there's still people. So Mr. Salvucci, yeah, people in Whitman are going to lose their jobs if we go to 6.5. I don't have an answer. I'm working the best I can to cut. We cut $290,000 off of costs that we had put in the budget for 15-1. The unanticipated, now I might get more money back from the governor in the governor's budget. I'm not sure. Representative Cutler put forth a motion to fund $100 per student instead of 20. That would be awesome. They've never done that, so I don't count on that. They've gone up to 50. That will be a bonus, and we could bring people back. I'm also looking at more circuit breaker money and money that is, there's movement at least in Beacon Hill right now to fund special ed transportation. All of the superintendents on the South Shore have gotten behind that. But I just want to say, we're not funded like some of our other towns. I know it's a town issue both in Whitman and Hanson. Contacted the superintendent of Bridgewater-Raynham today. He asked for a 4.4 increase in his budget this year. 5.1 or 5.6 was ours. We could cut back, but he was looking at a 4.4%. West Bridgewater was looking at a 5.1% from special education. I don't know what they were funded. I believe South Shore Voc Tech was funded at 3.1%, and if 3.1% was what we got and what I asked for, it would be an 8.5% on the assessment this year, not a 6.5.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Please.
Don Byers, 20 Russell Road. Thank you for mentioning my email, but I wanted to mention one other fact. Superintendent mentioned charter schools and South Shore VOTEC. I believe their last budget increases from FY18 to FY19, South Shore Charter School went up 15%. I mention this only because we hear about the Whitman Regional School District budget going up 10%, and it seems like a very large number, and it is a large number, but it's important to recognize how that correlates to other schools in their increases. And my understanding of South Shore VOTEC, their FY18 to FY19, went from $1,429,000 to $1,556,000.
3.1%.
Okay. Okay. So I feel that that is similar to what Whitman-Hanson Regional School District is asking for. One other piece of information, the out-of-district special ed, from the numbers I checked, Whitman-Hanson has 115 students. I can be corrected if I'm wrong. South Shore VOTEC, as far as special education, does not have any out-of-district students. And South Shore Charter School does not have any special ed out-of-district students. So those high numbers are not in their budget, although their budgets have also gone up a very similar percent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Don. Just to make sure this conversation stays balanced, one thing to be aware of, and it hasn't been said yet, is that in the version of Article 2 that the department heads derived, and then received some support from the selectmen last week, had each of the departments, yes, saving their personnel and saving raises, but they also, each one of them received cuts, just cuts that were well thought over by the department heads. The schools, on the other hand, are receiving an increase. Every other town department's getting cut. Schools are receiving an increase. It's not as great an increase as I would like to see them get. It's not as great an increase as they need. But just to keep it real, departments are getting cut. Schools are getting an increase. Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think, just to put it into context, I think the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee are in agreement of what we need to do. It's just a when, I think, is the thing that we need to just talk through, I think, at this point. So, just for our, the discussions that we had initially in this budget process, and it's been going on for quite some time, obviously, but more or less the understanding that we had was that we were going to meet on a regular basis to update each other as to what direction that we were going to go in. And the last direction that this board, the Finance Committee, got from the Board of Selectmen was that we were going to move forward with a 2.5 override. You heard from the superintendent about the financial needs of the school. There is no doubt that the only way that this financial crisis can be addressed is with a 2.5 override. Now, we waited last year, and we were in agreement from the start. From the last time we met, everybody on that board and everybody on this board was aligned with promoting a 2.5 override. Somehow, between the last time this committee met with this committee, that direction changed. And it's unfortunate because it's the open communication that we had hoped would continue throughout this process took a turn. And then, like I said, it's understandable. Departments have an obligation to their people to make sure that they're fully staffed, and I understand that. We get that. But at the end of the day, we waited to correct this issue last year. I, for one, am not really all that comfortable with waiting to fix it in the fall.
All right. Yeah, it's been said over and over again, and I could like Frank say it over and over again, but he announced at last year's town meeting that next year we're going to need a sizable override. It's a theme that I've brought up a number of times over the course of the past year. Yeah, and it did take a swing. It took a swing within the last couple of weeks. And I'd have to think about that some more. I'd have to think about that some more myself, but.
I don't think we need to make a decision about the direction unless
Well,
there needs to be a decision on what needs to be posted on the warrant. Correct?
Well,
Well, no, the bigger issue is there's a ballot.
there's a ballot questions we have to decide upon.
Dawn, what's the date?
Actually, the 13th is the 35th day, which is Saturday.
So we would have to have a decision for a ballot by
Saturday.
the 11th.
Mhm.
No.
Yeah.
Saturday, yeah.
No, the 11th is Thursday, 11th is Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, because clerk's office is closed on Fridays. And the ballot question has to be voted by this board and presented.
Mhm.
So as part of that consideration, can we
Yeah.
just go back to the other Article 2, the one that concerns using the debt exclusion? Should the debt exclusion fail, what then would happen to the 6.5%? Would the budget be workable with a 6.5% allocation to the assessment?
If you look at what I passed out tonight, if we do not have a debt exclusion and we do not have an override, and we use available funds, at the end of town meeting, we will have voted up to Article
29.
29, which means all of the must-dos, none of the requests from departments or schools for this year. And we would have 243, 400 and
$243,478.
plus 178. So 2, 3, 4, whatever, around $400,000 to work with to spend out, to spend all of our free cash, to spend our capital if we chose to do that. So if the budget that is here passes and no override passes, we will have to decide whether to come back and do those articles that we can do with the money that's available, or continue to work to reduce the budgets in order to fund those articles. Because it's one or the other.
Right, so the assessment might, at that point, go from 6.5 back to 4, if there's no
No.
debt exclusion.
Once an assessment is voted,
Okay,
it's done.
Right.
It can't be,
but no, there's no
reduced.
consideration for undoing what we did last year in taking money out of stabilization to balance the budget last year. This doesn't put that money back in.
Correct.
Okay. So again, it's just, it's not a what, it's a when, and, you know.
Right.
It's definitely a conversation we need to have, that's all. But
But
time's running out.
we need to make a decision tonight about what goes on the ballot.
Right. So just,
If I may, I think last year we came down to the final hours. We were going in a direction, and it was decided on taking the capital stabilization out because it was too late. We had to do something. Here we are again, I feel. I mean, it's not a question of what, it's when. And we're gonna have to take that stab and see if we can get to 2.5 at some point. We should have done it last year. We didn't have time. We didn't have time to educate the people. We thought we were gonna get a jump on it this year, starting so early. Gosh, we started in November this year. When I was on with Bill Capoche, we didn't start in January.
Right.
So I think everybody knows that we need some more revenue. And that, unfortunately, all the townspeople, they're gonna have to come up with some more money. We had the survey, we had that survey with Dr. Tazi, whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
And it sounded like there was an appetite that people who answered it.
Well, not a happy appetite, not a heavy appetite, but there was an appetite,
Just
yeah.
consider, we were here last year,
Yeah.
we're here again this year.
Right,
Okay, thank you.
okay.
If I can say something. I mean, it was probably literally exactly a year to the day when 3 members of this board made a decision, and I will stand by it, that every department last year got fully funded. we were very well aware at that point what we needed to do. Didn't happen in July, didn't happen in August, didn't happen in September, and we sit here 4 weeks out of town meeting. I'm disappointed by that. I can't blame anybody else. I can only blame myself. Now, I was in Monday's meeting with the department heads, and they present a plan that to me it works somewhat. It does keep people employed. Very, very important to me. Not all the teachers. That disappoints me because they are, and I said this right in our meeting, I view the school department just like I view the fire and police department. They are a town department. But I wonder, and here's where I'm slightly confused, is we talked about a debt exclusion. And that's why the department head budget works, because they're utilizing that money and filling their budget. At no point did I think if that failed, we would then again strip free cash and stabilization. To me, completely wiping out your capital stabilization is a very risky move. Now, we had talked about the debt exclusion and an override. The problem is with an override, you just can't ask for a blank number. And that's what I think we'd be doing right now if we put an override on the ballot, is asking for a blank number. To me, I think if I have faith that we can pass an override, it needs to be completely detailed where the money's going. The debt exclusion is something that I've talked about for years now on this board. I think it needs to be done. I think a lot of people understand that at this point, of exactly, we got something out of it, it served its purpose, but it's kind of extended its shelf life. But the scary fact is, we're not saying no override for the town. It's the time frame when we're going to do it. So for anyone to leave this meeting and think they're not going to put an override on, they're not going to try and seek an override, well, we have to, because if the debt exclusion doesn't, you have no more money. There's no money to fix a disaster that occurs. We've wiped it out.
I'd take a chance here. I'd accept a motion to put on the ballot an operational 2.5 override and a debt exclusion. If someone wants to make that motion, we can discuss it.
I will make that motion.
Is there a second?
And I'll second it for discussion. All right, my feeling is, first of all, Fred, just to let you know, I fought to go from 4 to 6.5. Just to let you know that. That's why we came back with the second meeting, we had the superintendent. That being said, I think we should be giving the taxpayers a choice of what they want to do. If they want to take, get rid of the debt exclusion and put that within the tax rate and then do an override for monies. My curiosity is what does the FinCom think about what we would look to do for an override? How much money?
Rick, before you answer, can I just because I may be, and you and I were in that meeting, and I think we left pretty much on the same page. But it's still both. It's just a time frame issue.
Right, yeah.
You still need both.
Yeah.
Right, it's either in the fall or
So you think we should do one and then the other, or two together?
That's the question.
That's the question.
That's the question, but the motion on
Yeah,
the
it's
table
for two to
now
both
is
together, yeah.
to put them both together.
And if we put them both on, we could essentially, they're
Well,
on, but we could take one.
We could pull them both.
They're on.
What?
They're on. You can't remove a ballot question once it's on the ballot.
Why would you put one, why wouldn't you put the 2.5 on and then wait to do the vote for the other one? I mean, why would you do it in that order?
Well,
Just
I
out of
do
curiosity.
understand that. I think it's a lot easier to present something when people know what they're going to pay for. And I did, trust me, I've debated this a lot. To have a capital plan that you can actually present to people and say, this is where does that give it a better chance for success? The fact of the matter is, you need both to pass. And what is the avenue for success?
And what is the order that we do it in? Because we've had this discussion, but I think the dollar figure, it has been pretty well discussed through this entire budget season that we are operationally deficient from 2 to 2.5 million. Frank, is that correct?
Correct.
So it's not like we don't have an idea of what needs to be done. We do. It's just, do we do it now? I'm of the opinion that the people of this community realize the statements that come from like the superintendent at this meeting, the impact to them is significant enough that I think they are ready and willing to put more resources. But at the same time, we've discussed this throughout this entire thing, it has to come with cuts. There can't be an override without the departments looking at their budgets, and I think utilizing the information from the department head budget scenario that we were presented, that's a good spot to start. I think the fact that they've done the work already makes it a little easier for us. So,
And they did make cuts, and you know, I honestly, I was taken back slightly by hearing of the first meeting myself. Sitting in the second one, I can do nothing but applaud the department heads.
There you go, yeah.
And I also understand where they were coming from. Listen, I'm frustrated, I'm sure Mr. Lynham, Lisa, and every other, so I get it. When you feel your back's put against the wall, you want to try and work your way out of it. That's what they did, and they did come up with a very workable document.
and I think that we can use pieces of it in moving forward, no doubt about it.
Can I ask him Rick a question? Rick, if we do, say, a $2 million override, where would you use that money?
Well, it's an operational override.
Right,
I think
now,
that-
but-
That's a discussion we need to have.
Okay,
But
now-
the Finance Committee has only addressed the worst-case scenario.
Okay.
We're ready to listen. We're ready to sit down with the Board of Selectmen and write another Article 2 that allocates the increased revenue. It absolutely should be done that way. So am I gonna tell you where it should be? No.
But if,
Well, actually, the town meeting would decide where it goes.
Right.
Because if the override passes, we have to have a second meeting to allocate those funds.
But we could have the work done in advance with the recommendation
We could.
from this.
and that could be even a further increase to Whitman Hanson.
It could. We expected that when we set the assessment for our worst-case scenario worksheet, we wholly expected an operational override would increase the assessment to the schools. You would have to.
And what would that do to Hanson?
And that's the problem, is Hanson. Because Hanson has set theirs at 6.5%. Now you'd be forcing them into an override situation. I don't know if they can get something on the ballot. And I don't know without the proper amount of time and preparation that you have, and I'll just say it, that you have a chance of an override passing in Hanson.
And just, I'll just take something you just said, Rick, where's the money gonna go? Well, if we actually did adopt this department head budget, we know, and we're funded within the levy, we know that the money needs to go to capital at that point.
And we need to return the money to our rainy day fund, without a doubt. But
Let's be clear, though, we still have a rainy day fund. What we spent was the capital.
Right.
Capital
The
stabilization.
capital stabilization,
Right.
which was basically our in and out account.
Right.
We used to vote money into it and then take it out to spend it. Stabilization has been untouched for the better part of 16 years.
And we wanna-
And I'm not
and we wanna
proposing
keep
to
it
touch
that
it.
So just to clarify a little bit, so
Yeah,
the
let's not-
operational override could increase the assessment to the schools. I'm not suggesting that it would be more than 6.5%. I don't want to make that suggestion at all. So talking about having to renegotiate the terms, you know, that to me is a number that the town can sustain, a 6.5%. We can no longer sustain double-digit.
What we need to do is we need to be able to target a figure of, like 70% of the new growth in the town will always go to the schools. We need to come up with some sort of a system where they know that they're going to get a certain percentage of any new growth that this town has over the next number of years. We're not at that point yet.
Yeah.
But we need to get to that point. And,
Wholly agree with that.
and the override and the debt exclusion will get us closer to that point. An override is necessary. I hope that your optimism is well-founded.
I hope that too.
But just to be clear, it's an operational override.
Absolutely.
You're not at a school committee meeting, you know.
That's why I'm trying to keep my mouth shut, but I did have a couple of what I thought might be a relevant point or two.
Be my guest.
Non-mandated busing. Right now, there's about $400,000
Yep.
committed within our budget
Right.
for non-mandated busing.
Right.
If your debt exclusion failed, that could be a place where you could find that.
Let the little guys walk, huh?
Or you charge families. Neighboring towns charge their families for non-mandated
It actually
busing.
did come up in discussion in our meeting.
You know, the non-mandated busing is something that our town meeting passed years ago. I see Beth, is Beth still here? No, she left. Years ago, the town meeting passed non-mandated busing because they needed it. They see all the Hanson kids getting bused because they don't have sidewalks. We have sidewalks, but we didn't want our kids walking in foul weather or with foul people around.
Not like us, huh?
So, no, not like when we were kids, so. It was important to the town at that time. I think it's still important, and I think there are families, Frank and I have had this conversation, there are families that cannot come up with a way of getting their kids to school without the non-mandated busing, because both parents are working, and because they have work schedules, et cetera, and they just can't arrange it. That will be one of the last things that I would cut.
That's your purview. It's, I felt my obligation to make sure I pointed it out. I would also hopefully envision with proper planning, if an override was done in the fall, for the schools to be able to place something of a pyramid, something of giving the voters the choice, because it's the taxpayer and the voter who chooses. What services would they like to bring back? Sort of an A, B, C, and the God forbid D, which would be nothing. Very well thought out, very clear and concise as to what people are voting for and what their vote would mean, and let the people have their choice as far as the schools go. With proper time and preparation, I believe that we could probably get our partners in Hanson to go along with something as well.
So actually, you would favor putting off an override until that kind of consideration could be done?
Correct, because I don't think we could take the money right now anyways. If I thought we had a chance of taking it and being able to be successful with Hanson and pushing something through, I'd be all for it, but trying to be realistic. And this is just my opinion, of course. I'm only
Okay, thank you.
one person. Thank you.
Good input.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do concur with Mr. Small about Hanson. I think the position that they're taking is, and they've never been one for passing overrides. And I think if we put them in a position like this, at this stage of the game, it might be a problem. So the debt exclusion first and the override in the fall makes more sense to me.
Okay, so you're speaking against the motion right now is to do both. You're
Yeah,
speaking
well,
against
I
it.
understand, and I agree with Mr. Lavatina about it. I just think the logistics of it is probably the only real solution.
And the FinCom recommendation is the override first and then debt exclusion later, or both?
The discussion that we've had on many occasions was the fact that we move forward with a 2.5 override in this fiscal year, and use the debt exclusion further down the line, whether in year 3 or 4, of a 5-year sustainable budget, if in fact we still needed to increase our levy capacity. So we have always concluded that having them both on the ballot was confusing, but I guess it's really what flavor do we think is going to be recommended by the most voters is the one we need to go with. So. But this board, just for your information, voted unanimously last week to move forward with recommending to this board place a 2.5 override on the ballot.
Okay, at what level? We have to write the ballot.
2.5.
2.5 million? Okay.
Well,
Okay, guys.
ultimately,
Mr.
it's...
Chairman?
Yes. Maker of the motion.
This is difficult for me, but
Oh, yeah.
I know what you're about to do.
This-
very.
Never done this before in your life, have you?
I've talked to a lot of people about this, and to be honest, it's going against probably what I personally would hope for. But I have talked to a lot of people about this, and I actually think that debt exclusion is the way to go. So I am going to rescind my motion.
Does the seconder agree
I
with
second.
withdrawing it?
Yeah.
And make a motion to put a debt exclusion on the ballot.
Okay, is there a second?
A second. Debt exclusion, not an override.
Something funny? Excuse me?
We just want a clarification
Yeah.
that the discussion that we just had.
Yeah, seemed to be leading towards something, a different result.
Right, so just for our information, Randy, how do you come to this conclusion after the discussion we've had for the last hour and 15 minutes?
Because I have a budget that works with a debt exclusion.
You have a budget that works?
Well, I've seen a budget that works with a debt exclusion.
Well, we would really be happy to see that budget too. That's all.
You haven't gotten it yet?
Yeah, it was handed out.
And it's, and what Mr. Small just said as a member of the school committee, that if we're providing what Hanson can give, and we are not gonna suffer major casualties, I can't even say that. If we, if 6.5 is a livable number for the schools, and it works for our police, fire, DPW, and town departments, then that is what I need to give the best opportunity for success.
I want to be clear about something. Rick, we just talked about what an override would do, and the override would restore capital. I think you said there was no additional money for the schools in there, that the override wouldn't affect the school budget. Is that correct?
An operational override?
He's talking about an operational override,
Yes.
Yeah, and that's,
not one that just restores capital.
yeah, I know. But the motion is still on the floor. That's why I want to clarify what we're talking about.
The motion was rescinded.
It was rescinded.
And I withdraw my comment.
The motion that's on the floor now.
That being said,
the motion
I
is-
do expect us to be pushing forward with a 2.5 override in the fall,
I agree.
when we
Put all the numbers
have a
together.
much clearer picture of what exactly we would be using that for.
And with some research that backs it up.
I completely agree with Randy. I think that is the way to go. We have to have a clear plan for the fall. We have to push and promote it to, so people can understand it. That's the key. They have to understand where the money's going and what we need it for. And I think that time frame with the budget that seems to work is the way to go.
My comment on it is, if we do go with the debt exclusion to take it out of that and go with the budget that Frank put together with the department head's help, maintaining 6.5% to the schools, matching Hanson, I would concur and say that we would go with Randy's vote. And then, like Brian says, let's see exactly what it'll help and do a debt exclusion, an override, excuse me, in the fall, so we have time to explain to the people exactly where those dollars would be going and the monies. But in that case, we still couldn't give any money to the school at that point, but we could backfill money.
For me, it just came down to exactly what are we foregoing?
Right,
And we're ultimately foregoing capital right now.
yeah, right.
So,
And it would be up for the people to decide.
I just don't know. I just have a question, just because I'm trying to figure all this out. So, debt exclusion, super, and then you move for, in the fall for an operational override, which would not go for the schools. So, which is okay, which is fine. My question is though, so they're gonna lose up to the schools at 6.5, and I thank you, that's awesome. The schools are gonna lose 23, 27 positions, and then the people who vote for the operational override which would include people who have children in the schools, would be told that that override would not then go to the schools.
Unless
I'm just trying to be
Hanson can
clear.
match it.
Right.
Not trying to.
You know,
Right, no, I'm just trying to be clear.
Yes.
we have to be clear about another item here, and it's something we always seem not to look at. There were $900,000 in capital items on that warrant. 600 is school-related expenditures. So it isn't just the budget.
Right.
It isn't just the operation. When you look at the capital we spent in the last 5 years, 70% of that capital went to school expenditures. I mean, we're losing sight of the big picture. There's a balance process here. We need money to operate, we need money to maintain, we need money to build.
No,
We're
no.
talking about a,
Awesome. I mean, all of you people have done this more than me. I just wanted to figure that piece out. I'm a simple guy. I was just trying to figure that piece out, that's all.
and
I appreciate
frankly-
everything that you do with capital and everything else. I just wasn't sure.
frankly, I think that we have to look at our total ability to support departments, including the schools, and try and make a determination of what could fit into that number. Because we're gonna ask you, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, we're gonna ask you to limit your requests in the future to a percentage of what we bring in. And all of that has to be set so that it works. Because the town's gonna live on 30% or 25%, schools are gonna live on 70 or 75. But we're gonna get one shot at this. If we get all this, there's no chance in the foreseeable future that we're gonna be able to go to that well again. So it has to be well planned.
Right, I don't want to throw it out too early and people say, no.
People need
People need-
more time to
Yeah.
think before they vote?
I think so.
We have to get it right.
No, you. Do you need more
No,
time
no,
before you
no,
vote?
no, I know what I want.
Yeah, we just, because we have a meeting tomorrow, and we just want to know what's going on here tonight. Because that affects everything.
I think in a few minutes you're gonna know.
All right. I mean, we just, you know, like Fred was saying, an override won't help the school right now, because Hanson's involved, and there's no way you're gonna get that out.
Right.
So we're better off probably postponing it till the fall and coming up with very good numbers, because these things have been so unclear in the past, and that's the
Well, you just-
problem. You get more armchair quarterbacks out there telling everybody the wrong,
Yeah.
misinformation.
Yeah, thank you.
I think there also has to be more discussion with Hanson as it relates to the schools.
Whether they can do something.
Because we can do whatever we do, but if Hanson isn't on the same page, it doesn't work on the assessment.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to have a ballot question prepared for
Let me read the
for a
motion.
debt exclusion.
Because it has
Do you
to
have
be
it ready to read?
Shall the town of Whitman be allowed to exempt from the provisions of Proposition 2 1/2 so-called, the amounts required to pay for the bond issued in order to construct and equip a police station and make repairs to the town hall and fire station? Yes, no. That's the ballot question.
Boy, there's gonna be a long explanation on the ballot
No.
about that.
We're gonna have to do a lot of educating because we can't put anything on the ballot, but that's,
Well, that could be part of the pre-meeting.
Absolutely.
town meeting.
Very good.
that we can
Okay, you guys ready to vote? I think I am, and actually what was just said started to actually turn the corner for me, that the better part of wisdom here would be to do the debt exclusion first and then have a well-thought-out campaign for the 2.5 override later on in the fall that will help both the schools and the town. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good, Randy.
Doesn't feel good, man.
Doesn't feel.
No, it doesn't feel good.
No, not at all, but
there is another question that has arisen relating to the budget. Last week I had suggested that we have a Saturday informational meeting. I did not realize, because I didn't look at my calendar closely enough, that is the beginning of the school week break. And I've heard from at least 3 people in the town hall that are not going to be available that Saturday. I'm wondering if it might make sense to do it on a Wednesday evening, perhaps the following Wednesday, from 6 to 8.
17th of month.
Yes. And the question is, would that work with everyone?
Wednesday, 17th?
Well, you can work those details out with.
I can, as long as the board's okay with
All right.
the schedule.
It's okay by me.
I'll be at Celtic.
Yeah, but it's not the weekend.
Frank, I'll be at Celtic. I'll be school.
We'll put a cutout of you up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I don't think there's anything else on the agenda. Rick? We're still talking.
Just to conclude, the conversation we just had about putting together a well-thought-out plan, present to the voters, we said that last year. We said that 1 year ago. And what makes me confident that we're going to do a better job in the next 6 months? That's all.
That is a good question. I think one of the things that makes me confident is the work that the Collins Group is doing with the town presently, and that they'll be continue to doing to get us on the road for a capital plan that makes sense.
Thank you for the time. We appreciate this format. I think it's important that we continue the joint discussions as much as we can. Thanks.
Rick, while we're here, since you're still in session, are you going back into your meeting?
Yeah, you want to
I'd
join?
rather do it in that format.
Very good.
Okay, motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Oh, I'm in open meeting violation.